The Genome Reborn, a standard for the next era of music. A documentary narration by Richard C.J. Young. Sejong. I am going to tell you a story about a name. The name is older than the streaming wars, older than the algorithm that ate the music industry, older than the panic that now grips it. I gave the music industry that name in 1999. I called the project the Music Genome Project, and I called the company that carried it Pandora. I chose both names deliberately, and I chose them as warnings, though only one of those warnings has ever been read correctly. The Human Genome Project had just begun. The proposition behind it was radical and simple. A human being could be described at the most fundamental level as a sequence of information. I believed a song could be described the same way. A song was not, to me, a product. It was a structured informational system. It had an architecture. It had genes. And if you could map those genes precisely in a controlled vocabulary with the discipline of a scientist rather than the enthusiasm of a marketer, then you could do something the music industry had never been able to do. You could know what a song actually was, independent of what anyone felt about it, independent of what the marketing department claimed it sounded like, independent of how many people had already clicked on it. That was the first name. The second name, Pandora, was the warning inside the gift. Everyone remembers Pandora's box as the vessel that, once opened, released every trouble into the world and could never be closed again. I chose that name because I knew exactly what I was opening. The box was not a radio. The box was a trade. The box was the bargain that the entire modern internet would be built on, before anyone quite understood that the bargain existed. You would give me a piece of your privacy, your listening habits, your skips, your thumbs, your zip code, your moods inferred from your behavior, and in exchange I would put music in front of you that you would like. The genome could not predict what you would love without first eating your privacy. That meal was the price of admission. The box was open from the moment you typed your zip code. I knew that when I named it. The name was the confession, hidden in plain sight, that a system which describes music perfectly will also describe the listener perfectly, and that the second description is the one everyone would eventually pay for. I opened that box once. This film is about whether it should be opened again, and if it is, who is allowed to hold the lid. To answer that, I have to take you back to the room where the genome was built, because the genome is the only thing in this story that ever actually worked, and the industry has spent 25 years trying to forget that it did. Before the algorithm, there was the genome. Picture a darkened room in 1999. A wall of CRT monitors. On every screen, a different waveform, a different song. Trained musicians sit at desks with headphones on, and they are not listening for pleasure. They are listening for structure. Each one marks a paper worksheet, attribute after attribute, in a controlled vocabulary that took years to design. Rhythm syncopation, vocal harmony type, instrumentation density, key modulation, dynamic range, tempo stability, the gender of the lead vocalist, the prevalence of groove, the level of distortion on the electric guitar, the type of background vocals. Each attribute scored 0 to 5 in half-integer increments. A single song carried up to 450 genes. A single song took 20 to 30 minutes of a human ear, listening, pausing, annotating, cross-checking. 10% of songs were analyzed by more than one musician to ensure conformity and statistical reliability. This was not an algorithm guessing. This was a human being describing, precisely and with quality control, what it heard. The genome covered 5 genres: pop and rock, hip-hop and electronica, jazz, world music, classical, each with its own gene count, its own controlled terminology, its own frame of reference. The methodology was the real invention: precisely defined terms, a consistent frame of reference, redundant analysis, ongoing quality control. The database was built to be reliably, structurally true. The genome did not ask whether a song was popular. It asked what the song was. Here is the part everyone misses. The genome was not a recommendation engine. That came later, and that came lesser. The genome was an epistemological claim. It claimed that a song is describable, that music is, at its fundamental level, information. That once you have described it precisely, you can organize it, discover within it, and value it in ways that what other people clicked on never can. A song is not a unit of consumption. A song is a structured system of attributes. Describe the system, and everything downstream, discovery, recommendation, valuation, payment, can be built on top of that description. The genome was information engineering. Everything that replaced it was something else. And then the genome died. Not because it failed, because the industry chose a cheaper substitute: behavioral prediction. You listen to a song, the platform logs the listen, and a collaborative filtering model predicts what you will click next. It does not analyze the music. It analyzes the crowd. It is not musical analysis. It is statistical prediction. And the difference matters, because behavioral prediction optimizes for engagement, and engagement is not the same thing as discovery. The genome understood that a song is a system of attributes. Modern streaming treats a song as a unit of consumption. The genome was information engineering. The algorithm is attention engineering. They are not the same discipline, and they do not produce the same result. But here is the deeper truth, the one that the name Pandora was warning about all along. Behavioral prediction did not replace the genome by accident. It was the genome's natural shadow. The genome described the song. The platform that hosted the genome watched which described songs you played, which you skipped, which you thumbed up, and it began to build a second description, not of the song, but of you. That second description was the real product. The song description became the scaffolding for the listener description. And the listener description was worth more money than the music had ever been, because the listener description could be sold to advertisers, to labels, to anyone who wanted to aim something at a human being. The box was open. I had built the hinge. The industry swung it wide and never looked back. The decision to describe the listener instead of the music was not a mistake made in ignorance. It was a decision made in profit. And it is the single decision that produced every crisis this film is about to describe. Let me explain the music industry using a metaphor from thermodynamics. A heat engine works by moving energy from a source to a sink. The efficiency of the engine is determined by how much energy survives the transfer. Every component between the source and the sink adds resistance, friction, leakage, loss. In engineering, we call this thermal resistance. The more intermediaries, the more resistance, the less useful energy reaches the destination. The music industry is a heat engine with catastrophic thermal resistance. A listener pays roughly $11 a month. By the time that money transits the corporate bureaucracy, the platform, the label, the distributor, the rights administrator, the collection society, the artist receives fractions of a cent per play. The system generates enormous heat. Almost no energy reaches the destination. The friction is not only financial, it is temporal. A song can be recorded, mixed, and mastered in a day. But clearing the rights, registering with a collection society, and receiving the first royalty statement takes 6 to 9 months. The creative cycle operates at the speed of electricity. The financial cycle operates at the speed of paper. That mismatch is not accidental. It is the source of the industry's overhead. Now, here's the diagnosis that the thermodynamic metaphor alone cannot make. The resistance is not random friction. The resistance is the direct, measurable cost of abandoning the genome's logic. The genome said, describe the song. The industry said, describe the listener. Every resistor in that pipeline, the label that advances money because it cannot read the song's structure, the rights administrator that takes 9 months because the rights are not machine-readable, the collection society that aggregates royalties because the royalties cannot root themselves. Every one of them exists to compensate for the fact that the system has no structural description of the music it is moving. The thermal resistance is the price of ignoring the genome. If the system knew what each song was, structurally, the way the genome knew, it would not need 5 to 7 intermediaries to move $11 from a listener to an artist. It would not need 9 months. The bureaucracy is not the disease. The bureaucracy is the symptom. The disease is the missing description. And now the system is being overwhelmed because the substitute has finally broken. As of the end of 2025, streaming services hosted 253 million tracks, over 250 million songs. The Luminate year-end report counted an average of 106,000 new tracks uploaded every single day in 2025, up from 99,000 the year before. Almost half of those files, 120 million tracks, received fewer than 10 streams in an entire year. 73% received fewer than 100. 88% received fewer than 1,000. 541,000 tracks, barely 0.2% of all available music, accounted for half of all global streaming consumption. The entire economy of recorded music now rests on a sliver of the catalog. Everything else is inventory that costs money to store and earns almost nothing. And then came the machines. In April 2026, Deezer, the only major platform that discloses AI volume data, reported receiving roughly 75,000 AI-generated tracks per day. That was 44% of all new uploads. Deezer tagged 13.4 million AI tracks in 2025 alone. By April 2026, the daily AI inflow had multiplied 7.5 times in just 15 months. Those AI tracks were 44% of uploads, but only 1 to 3% of actual streams. And 85% of that thin slice was flagged as fraudulent and demonetized. Strip the fraud, and genuine AI listening was under half of 1% of all streams. AI music in 2026 is not a consumption revolution. It is a distribution and fraud problem. It floods the supply side without touching the demand side, and every flooded track claims a share of the same finite royalty pool. The legacy streaming model was built on a scarcity assumption, that the supply of recorded music was finite and could be curated. That assumption is dead. Supply is now functionally infinite, and a system that splits a fixed pool across infinite supply drives the per-unit value to zero. This is not a policy problem. It is a thermodynamic one. The labels and platforms have responded. Spotify removed over 75 million so-called spammy tracks in a single purge and introduced a threshold requiring a track to reach 1,000 streams in a 12-month period to qualify for royalties. Deezer, partnering with Universal and Warner, launched an artist-centric model that double boosts royalties for tracks with at least 1,000 streams a month and 500 unique listeners. Lucien Grange, the CEO of Universal, used his 2026 New Year address to warn about the exponential growth of AI slop. In 2025, tracks distributed by the three major labels accounted for just 3.8% of all uploads, down from 8% the year before. The majors are a shrinking share of a flooding pipe. Every one of these responses adds another resistor. Takedown requests, AI detection pipelines, thresholds, clawbacks, renegotiated licenses. Each response is more bureaucracy layered on top of a bureaucracy that was already losing the thermodynamic war. You cannot fix a thermodynamic problem with a policy. You can only rebuild the engine. And you cannot rebuild the engine without answering the question the genome answered 25 years ago. What is the song? Describe the song and the resistors dissolve. Refuse to describe the song and you are left managing the heat forever. But here is where I want to be careful and where I want to stop describing a crisis and start offering, as an option of what perhaps should happen, a way out. Because the genome is not a relic. The genome is the one instrument in this story that has already been proven to work at scale, and the proof was Pandora itself. Pandora showcased the value of the Music Genome Project. It demonstrated, with millions of listeners and a quarter-century of data, that a structurally described catalog could put the right song in front of the right person with a reliability that no behavioral model has ever matched. The reason it worked was that the genome did not guess. It knew. It knew that this song had a syncopated groove and a minor key bridge and a female lead with a breathy register. And it knew that you, statistically, responded to that combination because it had watched 1,000 listeners like you respond to it before. That is the genome's real power. It is predictive, but it is predictive from the ground up. It predicts from the structure of the music, not from the herd. It is the only filter that has ever been built that can tell the difference between a song that is popular because it is good and a song that is good but has not yet found its audience. Now think about what that instrument means in 2026, when the supply of music has become functionally infinite and the vast majority of that supply is AI-generated slop. Sterile, structurally generic audio that bloats servers and dilutes payout pools without ever moving a human being. The platforms are trying to fight that flood with blunt force policy. Ban tracks under a certain length, strip out ambient keywords, raise a 1,000 stream threshold, purge 75 million files at a time. It is an inefficient, losing battle, because the flood regenerates faster than the policy can react, and the policy never asks the only question that matters. Is this track structurally a piece of music that a human being would choose to hear again? Or is it slop? Here is the option that perhaps should happen. The same genome that once sorted a finite human catalog could be mechanized to sort an infinite AI pool in real time. Take the 450 genes. Take the decades of human preference data that Pandora already gathered. Train a machine, at scale, to read the structural complexity, the syncopation, the harmonic movement, the emotional resonance, the dynamic range of every incoming file, human or machine, and to judge it against the genome's description of what music that human beings actually love has always looked like. The genome becomes a cellular membrane. It passes through the tracks with genuine structural integrity and rejects the slop before the slop ever touches a royalty pool, before it ever reaches a listener's feed, before it ever claims a share of a finite lake. The AI tracks that possess real musical structure, and some will, because structure is not the exclusive property of human origin, pass. The tracks that are statistical wallpaper do not. The filter does not care who made the song. It cares what the song is. That is the genome's logic, and it is the only logic that can survive infinite supply. This is not a new invention. This is the old instrument, redeployed. Pandora already proved the genome could put the right music in front of the right listener. The mechanized genome would prove it can also keep the wrong music off the listener's plate entirely. Same instrument. 2 floods. 1 originator. The first flood was the flood of human catalog the genome organized in 1999. The second flood is the flood of AI slop the genome could clean up now. The solution does not need to be invented. It needs to be taken out of the box, stripped of the privacy surrender that the first deployment required, and run as a commons quality filter instead of a private recommendation engine. I will come back to that word, commons, because it is the most important word in this film. But first, the standard. Before I say what comes next, I want to set the standard by which the next era should be judged. Not by me, by the logic of the genome itself. 3 tests. Any architecture for music, in any era, passes or fails against these 3. The first test. Describe music as information. A system passes this test if it carries a structural description of the song. Not the listener, not the crowd. The song. Who wrote it? Who performed it? What it actually is, musically. Without this, the system is blind. It cannot discover, cannot filter, cannot value, cannot distinguish a human masterpiece from 10 million machine-generated files. A system that does not describe the song is a system optimizing consumption. It will always, eventually, flood. The second test. Settle value with minimal resistance. A system passes this test if the energy that leaves the listener arrives at the artist, with as few resistors as possible, as fast as possible. If the creative cycle runs at the speed of electricity, the financial cycle must run at the speed of electricity. A 6 to 9 month settlement delay is not a feature of a music business. It is evidence of a broken engine. Thermal resistance is not a tax. It is a failure. The third test. Preserve the creator's structural sovereignty. A system passes this test if the creator retains authority over their own work. The description, the rights, the splits, the terms, and cannot have that authority revoked or rewritten by the platform that hosts them. Sovereignty is not a payout percentage. Sovereignty is the right to describe your own song and to have that description honored. 3 tests. Describe the song. Settle the value. Protect the creator. Now let us put the real candidates of 2026 on trial. The legacy DSPs, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon. They fail the first test because they describe the listener, not the song. They fail the second test with 5 to 7 resistors, fractions of a cent, 9-month settlement. They fail the third test because the platform owns the relationship, the recommendation, and the terms, and the creator is a guest in someone else's store. They survive only because the substitute, behavioral prediction, was good enough to hold attention for 20 years. It is no longer good enough. The flood has exposed it. The artist-centric reforms, Deezer's double boost model, Spotify's 1,000 stream threshold. These are the legacy DSPs attempting to pass the second test without passing the first. They are trying to reduce dilution by raising the bar at the destination, but they have no structural description of the song at the source, so the bar is arbitrary. They will always be one step behind the flood. They are patches on a burning engine. They fail the first test by definition. They partly address the second. They do not touch the third. The cooperatives, Resonate, a multi-stakeholder platform cooperative, democratically governed by its members. This is the genuine attempt at the third test. The creators and listeners own the platform, so the sovereignty question is structurally answered. On the second test, a co-op can reduce resistance because it removes the profit-taking intermediary. But on the first test, the description of the song, the co-ops have largely inherited the same behavioral logic as the DSPs. They are fairer pipes carrying the same blind content. They pass the third. They partly pass the second. They fail the first. The direct-to-artist platforms, Bandcamp, Tape Deck. These answer the second test directly. Bandcamp sells the record. The money goes to the artist. No pool, no fraction. Tape Deck guarantees at least 1 cent per stream with no shared pool. On the third test, they are strong. The artist sets the terms. But on the first test, they are storefronts, not description engines. They carry what the artist tells them to carry. They do not describe the song structurally. They pass 2 and 3. They do not pass 1. The high payout streamers, Tidal, Kobus. These pay more per stream and carry a human curation heritage that gestures toward the first test. A human is choosing, which implies a human is describing. But the description is not machine-readable, not structured, not embedded in the file. It lives in an editor's head. It does not scale. They partly pass the first. They partly pass the second. They do not pass the third because the platform still owns the relationship. The AI licensing frameworks, the settlements between the major labels and the AI music generators, Warner with Suno and Udio, Universal with Udio, Sony litigating both. These are not architectures for music. They are architectures for indemnifying the generation of music. They do not describe the song. They describe the training data. They fail all 3 tests, and they are being built right now as the likely successor to the current DSP model by the same companies that broke the current one. No current architecture passes all 3. Most do not pass 1. The honest finding is that the industry is about to choose its next engine, and none of the engines on offer actually know what a song is. They are all, every one of them, still optimizing consumption. They have learned nothing from the genome. They are about to repeat the mistake at greater scale with better funding. And the one instrument that could clean up the flood, the mechanized genome, run as a commons quality filter, is not, at this moment, on any of their roadmaps, because it would strip them of the one thing they will not surrender: the private ownership of the description. Which brings me to the 4th test, and it is the test the next era will be judged by more harshly than the first 3 combined. It is not derived from the genome's logic. It is derived from its history, from my history. I opened this box once. In 1999, I built a system that could describe a song as information. It was the right idea. It was also, the moment it was built, a tool. And a tool that describes music at scale is a tool that can collect, route, predict, and value music at scale. The genome was always going to be more than a recommendation engine. I knew that when I named it Pandora. The name was the warning, embedded in the brand. What climbed out of that box, over 25 years, was not what I designed. I designed a description. The industry built a surveillance apparatus on top of it because the description was owned by one company, and that company's incentive was to monetize the listener, not to serve the song. The genome became the foundation of behavioral prediction. The tool that described music became the tool that described the crowd. The box was open. I could not close it. So here is the 4th test. The standard must belong to no platform. If the next genome, whatever describes the song structurally, Whoever builds the description engine that finally passes the first 3 tests, whoever mechanizes the 450 genes to filter the infinite pool, if that genome is owned by a single platform, a single label, a single registry, a single co-op, a single government, then it does not matter that it passes the first 3 tests. It has already failed the 4th. A structural description of music, owned by one entity, is not a standard. It is a weapon. It is a procurement specification for the next enclosure. It is the blueprint for a monopoly that knows what every song is and can decide which songs are seen. A DSP that owns the genome will use it to route attention and keep the relationship. A label that owns the genome will use it to decide which artists get described and which get buried. A co-op that owns the genome will use it fairly, until the co-op's incentives drift, as every institution's incentives eventually drift. A registry that owns the genome will use it to charge rent. The genome's logic is a commons, or it is a weapon. There is no third option. And the mechanized genome, the filter that could clean the AI flood, is the most dangerous version of all, because a proprietary slop filter would not merely sort music. It would decide, on behalf of every listener and every artist on Earth, what counted as music at all. That is not a filter. That is a throne. So let me say plainly what perhaps should happen. The genome, mechanized, run as a commons quality filter, owned by no platform, would do what the original Pandora proved was possible. Put the right music in front of the right listener. And what the original Pandora could not do, because it lived inside a single company. Keep the wrong music off the listener's plate without surrendering the listener's privacy to a private owner. The genome would clean up the music industry once again, the way it cleaned up the chaos of finite human catalog in 1999, only this time it would clean up the chaos of infinite AI slop. And this time it would do it as a standard and not as a product. The same instrument. 2 floods. 1 originator. The box, finally, with a lid that belongs to everyone and therefore to no one. This is not a prediction. I am not vain enough to claim the industry will do this. The industry has every incentive to do the opposite, to own the filter, to privatize the standard, to turn the cleanup of the flood into the next subscription. I am offering this as an option of what should happen, because I am one of the few people alive who knows it can happen, and because I am the one who built the hinge the first time and watched it swing the wrong way. I set this standard once in 1999 with a name. 4 tests. Describe the song. Settle the value. Protect the creator. Keep the standard. If the next era passes all 4, it will be worthy of the name. If it passes only 3, it will be the current era with better marketing. If it passes fewer, and most of what is being built right now will pass fewer, then it will be worse than what we have, because it will have the genome's power without the genome's discipline. I helped open this box once. I watched what climbed out. The privacy surrendered at sign-up. The listener described instead of the song. The bureaucracy built to compensate for the missing description. The flood of infinite supply. The blunt force policies that cannot keep up with it. All of it climbed out of that box, and I could not close it. This film is not a blueprint for opening it again. This film is a standard, and perhaps, if the industry is wise enough to take the option, a way to clean up the mess the first opening made. The genome already proved it can put the right music in front of the right person. The mechanized genome, run as a commons, could prove it can keep the wrong music off the table entirely. That is the cleanup. That is the rebirth. That is the only configuration of this instrument I can see that would let us close the box cleanly. I opened this box once. This time, the lid stays bolted, but bolted open as a standard, where everyone can see it, and no one can own it. Richard C.J. Young, Sid Young, Originator, the Music Genome Project.